What's the most frustrating rule your parents had? My father forced us to speak only in questions because he said statements were for people who had stopped learning. If we accidentally spoke not in a question, he'd say, "So you think you know everything now?" Your brain just started dying. Dad was a failed philosophy professor who got fired for screaming at students who gave definitive answers. He'd quiz us at dinner about obscure facts, then mock us whether we knew the answer or not. Saying wrong meant we were stupid, but right meant we were arrogant. After our mom died, he threw out all our books that weren't philosophy texts because he said fiction was for people too weak to face reality. When I was 6 and told him I loved him, he slapped me and said, "Love is just chemicals lying to your brain. Don't be so pathetic." When I was 15 and my brother Ralph was 8, Dad announced his new system for optimal brain development. From now on, we could only speak in questions to keep our minds eternally seeking. He demonstrated by turning every basic need into philosophical torture. "I'm hungry" became what nutrients might satisfy my current caloric deficit. He made us practice with flashcards showing statements crossed out in red. If we slipped up, he'd make us stand in the corner reciting, "Is my brain dying because I claimed false certainty?" For hours, living in questions destroyed every normal interaction. Like I couldn't tell Dad I was going to do my homework. Instead, I had to say, "Do you think the activity I'm about to engage with will expand my knowledge or just reinstate my teacher's beliefs as if they're my own?" One time I had a 103-degree fever and I couldn't tell him I was sick. I just had to say, "Why might my body be manifesting these symptoms?" Dad would time our response conversions, demanding faster question formulation each week. Dad told us he expected us to keep this up outside the house too, and since he was friends with our principal, we knew we had no choice. Teachers thought Ralph and I were being deliberately disrespectful and passive-aggressive. Dad forced me to explain his system to my English teacher during a parent-teacher conference, who looked horrified as I asked, "Would you like to understand why questions indicate superior intelligence?" Ralph was the one who was really struggling though. He was young and confused, and he'd cry trying to turn, "I need the bathroom," into an acceptable question while dancing in place. Dad would block the bathroom door saying, "How can you need anything when you haven't properly questioned the nature of need?" Friends stopped coming over after witnessing our dinner conversations. How was school? Became a 40-minute philosophical debate about the nature of experience. My girlfriend broke up with me when I answered, "I love you," with "What might love mean in our particular context?" Because I knew Dad was reading my texts. Dad monitored us constantly, keeping tallies of our statements versus questions. He'd burst into our rooms at night demanding to know what we were thinking, and wouldn't leave until we'd converted every thought into question form. Even my dreams became interrogations. Then one day Ralph choked on his dinner. He was turning blue at the dinner table and clutching his throat. I screamed, "He's choking! Ralph's choking!" Dad stood there coldly and said, "Are you making declarations while your brother suffocates? How disappointing." I shoved past him and performed the Heimlich maneuver until Ralph coughed up the food. Then I called 911 and spoke to them like a normal freaking person while my dad scoffed in the background. At the hospital, doctors found Ralph severely underweight because he hadn't been able to figure out how to ask for food. I couldn't believe I'd let it get this bad. When they asked about home stress, I told them everything. I used complete sentences, declarative statements, facts. It felt like breathing after being underwater for years. "My father is abusing us," I said. "He won't let us speak normally. My brother is 8 years old and can't ask for water without having a panic attack." Child services got involved immediately, but Dad couldn't accept losing control over our speech. He started showing up at our foster home, standing outside, shouting questions. "Don't you miss your father? Wouldn't you like to come home where thinking is encouraged?" He filed custody appeals claiming the state was murdering our intellects by letting us speak in statements, and even sued the hospital for misdiagnosing philosophical awakening as anxiety. He started a petition claiming his children were being dumbed down by declarative statements. When Ralph and I had to testify at the custody hearing, Dad coached us from across the courtroom, mouthing question form when we spoke. The judge asked us one simple thing: "Tell us what you want." Ralph started crying and reverted to questions out of fear. "May I please not go back? Would it be okay if I stayed where statements are allowed?" Dad looked triumphant, thinking Ralph's questions proved his system worked. I stood up and said loudly and clearly, "We want to stay away from our father. We want to be allowed to say what we actually think." The courtroom went silent. Dad screamed, "Your brains are dying with every word!" The judge terminated his parental rights immediately. Ralph and I live with our aunt now. Yesterday, Ralph said, "I'm happy," without flinching. That's all I wanted.